Hello friends, this is Melanie again. Also today on June 27th, 2023, I'm on a roll after the astro weather for the week. I would love to address specifically the significance of the full moon that's coming up on July 3rd for Canada with its chart for July 1st, 1867, and for the US for its chart for July 4th, 1776. So both countries are really affected by this full moon as it falls right between their so-called birthdays. So let's take a quick look at the full moon chart again, which I talked a lot about in the previous video. Here is the full moon chart. So you can see the Sun and Mercury in central Cancer, which, as I mentioned before, has a Scorpio undertone, and so does United States and Canada with their July 1st, July 4th charts and birthdays. Scorpio is, for one thing, always deals with power, with deeper issues that are hidden, covered in the dark, and need to be processed. And in this case, it has to do with the identity, also the sun, and the spirit of the people and of the nation, right? So the what's whom and which country do we belong to? The extension of the family and the tribe in a way is the country, and that is a Cancerian theme. While leadership and governance and government have to do with Capricorn. So both of that is coming up for in general with that full moon, but also specifically for the United States. And so the Sun and Mercury in the full moon chart in central Cancer, right? So we're all this sense of belonging and national, tribal identity and spirit is housed, so to say. And then you have the moon in Capricorn. So there is a need, very simply put, there is a need for leadership, for better leadership. You can hear that everywhere in the world and specifically also in North America. So what is a qualified and quality leadership? Let me take a sip of water. And a responsible leadership, a leadership that's in integrity. All of this Capricorn. And it is based on the energy of elders, of true leaders who have deserved their position and who are responsible in integrity and such, right? And can be held accountable. All of that is Capricorn, who do the work basically also. Then we have in the full moon chart the connection of the moon, of the full moon, and by the way, it will be a supermoon, the first supermoon of 4 this year, and it appears larger than life, larger than a regular full moon because of its position in relation to the Earth in its orbit. And yes, and this one appears larger and approaches Pluto. So we can't quite see that. We will not see that because Pluto is invisible to the naked eye. But the Moon-Pluto conjunction will be literally on July 4th. Super relevant for the US. So I definitely get back to that in a second when I go also to the Pluto return of the US. Then in the full moon chart, the full moon is also in a T-square. You can see here that's a red sharp angle, 90-degree angle to Chiron in Aries. So Chiron in Aries can be the ignition of tension, and it can be the outlet as well. So the energy wants to be channeled into this Chiron. And Chiron in Aries, we've seen that since 2019. Chiron will be in Aries still till 2027. It is to be just the archetypal theme of Chiron is wounded healer, in this case wounded warrior, and it has to do also with medicine in so many regards, right? So it is about healing, what really brings healing, what's going on in the medical field, practically speaking, in the medical industry, and how that has been so much on alert and so much in the crossfire areas, right? In the last few years. Is it time for renewal? Is it time for new beginnings? Lots of battles are going on over medical issues, and that would have been one of the catalysts for lots of tension in both countries. Then it's also about medicine and original medicine. So I'd like to go also for Canada specifically, since I live here, also regarding Indigenous medicine. And that is very Chiron in Aries as well. So the medicine of who was here first, who were the first people, and how can that help us, and how do we need a new beginning. And the whole slogan of truth and reconciliation needs to be put into action, right? That's Aries again, right? So there needs to be action and true beginnings, authenticity in it all, right? Not just a politics. So yeah, let's look at the country charts and start with Canada, also in order of appearance in the calendar, not appearance of chart-wise and age. Canada, July 1st, 1867 was when the dominion of these self-governing nations of the British Empire was Canada became one of these dominions, right, of the British Empire at the time. So it still remained quite dependent. It was a federation, right? A federation of colonies in British North America, it was called at the time. So all these different provinces joined a federation but still in conjunction and in closely linked to the British Empire at the time. So that theme of the link of the umbilical cord in a way to the British Empire is also as strong with so much Pisces in its chart, right? Pisces and 12th house, what's going on in the background, and what are all these connections and links and actually dependencies, right? So we see Jupiter there, we see the south node, and we see Chiron, right? So there's a lot. It's really important with Jupiter that these links and these connections and these dependencies are upheld, and they can't just be cut and go away. It's an ongoing inner connection, basically, to British Empire and now to the Commonwealth, of course, afterwards. So with the Commonwealth, Canada, of course, became an independent nation, but still remained very dependent and closely linked to the motherland, they call it, right? And this is kind of an umbilical, this is kind of a womb energy here, right? And then there's a south node there. And then there's Chiron there. The south node say, okay, too much of that, it doesn't serve your evolution. You have to move beyond that, right? So beyond all this link and connection and dependency being still fed by all this energy, we need to, with the north node in Virgo, become more self-sufficient. And there's Mars there too, right? And work on our own Canadian alignment with Virgo, alignment with the purpose of Canada beyond the British link, right? And then there's Chiron as well. So Canada also had its Chiron return, which happens every 50 years. The last one was around 2017, which was 150 years after 1867. And so it also showed there is quite a wound in all this confusion of also, I should say, all the different uh, connections, all the mix of things that happen in Canada, especially First Nations wise. How does this all fit together? It appears like a big chaos, really, right? And a lot of themes that are going on in the name also of religion. So we're talking also about the so-called residential schools, not really residences, but the abduction, I should say, also of indigenous children in the name of religion, re-education, and then blatant abuse. So all of this came out in the last few years. Lots of wound there, right? Lots of wound that is really there in the collective, even though everything seems to be da 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 da, right? But not anymore, right? So here is also Chiron, and that's where Neptune comes in. So Neptune is now end of Pisces. So here's again the chart of the full moon. You can see Neptune, end of Pisces, and going retrograde on June the 30th, just before the full moon and before Canada Day, Colonial Canada Day. So Neptune on Canada's Chiron, that comes only every 165 years. So it's basically for the first time in Canadian history, because Canada's Neptune is in Aries. Canada will have its Neptune return in the 2020s, late 2020s or something. So anyway, so Neptune is now here, and that would also say, hey, can we dissolve all this? How can we unravel all that? How can we let go of this whole codependency dynamic, and not just like good old empire, but also now in the meantime global imperialism and Canadian involvement and entanglement in all of this. Then yeah, and then of course also all the suffering with Pisces, all the wounds, all the suffering that happened in the name of religion and otherwise, um, on the land and on the people of this land. A lot of that is coming up now, is being washed up now with the what I call a wave, the outflowing wave of the Pisces age of the last 2000 plus years, right? So all of this is coming up now as we're coming to the transition out of the Pisces into the Aquarius age. So we can't continue to carry all this over, right? And we can't continue to do things in the same pattern, which have a lot to do with victims, perpetrators, saviors, and the thing goes on and on, right? So Neptune, right? Neptune's super important, and for Canada also additionally, Neptune will square, not even doing that yet, but soon, the closer it gets to the end of Pisces, it will also square Canada's moon, end of Gemini. So moon, end of Gemini, on the nesting point from Gemini to Cancer, where the variety of people in this way and different languages, like yes, all the indigenous languages, the English, the French, that's quite a theme with Canada, the languages of the people. So how do they all come together into one house, one home, one nest, right? And is it, how is union even possible? How is the unify, what is the unifying factor here from a Neptune Pisces perspective for all this diversity and all these divergent interests, right? And groups and yeah, and mentalities even, right? So that will be a big theme in the next few years. Back to the full moon. The full moon, as I said, is super close to Canadian and US sun. So Canada's sun is in like 850 of Cancer next to Uranus. And the Sun for the full moon will be at 11 degrees Cancer, and Mercury next to it at 14. So just a little bit off, but super close, right? So this is again about identity, about belonging, about history also, right? Awareness of history, where it all came from, is really interesting for Cancer always. And Uranus, right? So what's with Uranus? So Canada's sun is connected with the planet Uranus. So there is this potential of independence and breaking away from the old family of colonies, if you may, of families otherwise. But it's also trauma, right? Uranus is also a planet that has to do with shocks, surprises, unexpected events, and trauma. So you could even see it from a trauma perspective that the country was founded in a context of trauma, really. When you think of the people of the land again, right? This is like the land itself and the Turtle Island, Cancer on the fourth house cusp. So all of that comes up for reflection and for re-envisioning. And let's see what the moon does, right? So the moon is in Capricorn, like 11 degrees ish, which is for Canada in the 10th house. And you can see the moon here in the chart, in the full moon chart, right? And Pluto as well. So Pluto on the cusp of the 10th, 11th house, moon on the cusp of the 10th house. So again, there is a strong need for leadership, for responsibility, for accountability, for so all sorts of, in a way, Capricorn is very conservative and it's resourceful. So it's also about what can we do, and very pragmatic too, right? How can we use this situation now that as we're in it, for the highest purpose? And what can be done with this? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Who is stepping up? And who's a good leader? So all of this is really important. And as I mentioned in the other video, maybe here as well, so Capricorn is originally rather tied to elders and the ancient ones too. So how can our ancestors and the ancestors of the land guide us in all of this? Then yes, also the moon approaches Pluto. Will be a Pluto conjunction of the month will be July 4th. And Pluto is currently late Capricorn on the cusp of Canada's 10th, 11th house, which is here. So that's the juncture between purpose and community, usually, right? In an individual chart, in a country chart, it's also like the purpose of the country and who are the country, whom and which other countries is the country collaborating, cooperating with, right? So, and that would require, so the shadow, let's start with that. The shadow that Pluto reveals about Capricorn is about the abuse of power and corruption and all sorts of abuse of positions of power and influence over people. And so as that is being revealed now, and Pluto has its last long phase in Capricorn now since June 11th until January 20th next year, we can see it basically like, okay, there's more pieces of history, of background that we find out about that really change history and change our perspective on it. And certain things just a really paradigm shift that we can't do things in the old ways anymore. So in that regard, my motto for Pluto in Capricorn, the old empire expires. So what really is the inquiry, what's the old empire here in this context? And yeah, and then from that place, what are what's from this historic notion of Capricorn, as that is being addressed, how do we go forward into the future together, and maybe together in a real community that's not about globalism but about real collaboration in a better way that's not another power grab. So and also that respects people, humans, right? And it's not another through the back door another level of control. So a lot is going on there with this Pluto transit, but not as much for Canada as for the US. Then let's go also to Chiron. In the chart, in the full moon chart, you see like Chiron is now in mid Aries, or towards 19 degrees Aries, and forms this T-square, right? So as I described before, and this is for Canada super close to Canada's ascendant and Neptune in Aries. So what's with that? One might think with a country with Aries rising would be home of the brave and stuff like that, but Neptune is there, right? So a planet on the ascendant affects the country's identity and also the image that it gives off, right? The persona, basically, in this case of the country. Well, what's Canada about, right? When you associate other countries, would influence, the planet influences more than sign, right? Because Neptune is just rising, that stands out more. So, and Neptune rules Pisces, which is another Piscean component here, right? So Neptune being in a way an ideal, a dream of adventure, Aries, pioneers. So it's in a way a myth. So you could say Canada is a myth. And so what's with that myth? With Chiron there, what is the wound of that myth? And what is the medicine for it? What is true, authentic new beginnings that are now called for, and that would be a good medicine for the country? So this full moon really brings it out, and Neptune also stations, is about to go retrograde, in other words, on July 23rd. So it's now very slow before doing this turnaround from Earth perspective from forward to retro. So Canada is quite affected by Chiron and has been already in the last few years, as Chiron approached Neptune, was on the ascendant pretty much since 2021, 22. And of course had a lot to do with the medical field and battles there, right? Yeah, so I move over to the US now in chart-wise. And as Canada Day approaches, Colonial Canada Day, followed by US Independence Day. And so here is the chart of the United States Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. The chart has Sagittarius rising, so it's a lot about pursuit of freedom and also freedom of faith and belief at the time, right? Happiness, of course, right? And yeah, and movement and a projection of its energy out into the world is very Sagittarian. Anyway, what's with the Cancer Capricorn dynamic for starters? See, the United States have a lot in Cancer, have Venus, Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury all in Cancer. So the Sun now is on the full moon day before Independence Day, will be very close to US Sun and Mercury nearby too, while US Mercury is also in Cancer. So there's a lot of awareness, a lot of discussion around the identity of the United States, already about elections next year, and what is going on, what brings the people together in a, also in a safe place, in a place of belonging, right? That's very Canada. Sorry, that's very Cancer, and is relevant for Canada and for US, right? So, place of belonging. So, in other words, the question: who belongs here? Do you still feel you belong to the U.S.? Do you? Does the spirit of the U.S. reflect your sense of home and belonging and all this, right? How it has evolved. And a lot has happened that came out of the US primarily since Pluto entered Capricorn. I'm thinking also of 2008, right? Financial crisis is when Pluto entered Capricorn, and it's now about to leave Capricorn. So, how do the biggest structures that govern the country affect its identity, and how are they being, what is being implemented? Again, what is good leadership? So Capricorn in the U.S. chart, first house actually, the moon will be in the first and second house. So there's a strong identity with this whole integrity point. So very important to say, yeah, we know so much. There's a lot of understanding about things. How do we implement it at this time with the powers to be and the powers in place? Pluto, US started out with this Pluto end of Capricorn, so it was a reflection of the end of an old empire and an independence from it. And now we're coming to another level of an old empire ending. Is it the American empire that's ending? Is it the corporate empire? Is this the military, industrial, and so on empire? Is it ending? Is it coming to a huge, intense collapse of sorts? Or is it just asserting its power even more, and revealing its shadow even more? And or are the powers of the U.S. and the shadow that the U.S. Projects out into the world, are they now coming full circle? The full moon is also a classic example of a full moon is a harvest moon. And yeah, so what are we harvesting? What are U.S. harvesting here, Pluto-wise, full moon-wise, and what's it got to do with a big notion for need, right? With Capricorn, a need for leadership, a need for Pluto, a need for transformation. So transformation also originating from its core, its essence. Let's say the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. What are these rights and freedoms? What's the value of them now, and how can they still serve as a guideline, right, from which to act, and from which the country can evolve into the future? So the Capricorn Aquarius junction from history to future. And yeah, it's interesting that the US have currently a president that has a lot in Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. Isn't that something? And yeah, and elections are coming and are typically also held in Scorpio season 2024. So yeah, what's with Chiron for the US? Now, here we go. The US have their Chiron in Aries, right? So they have their Chiron return. So they have they come up to their fifth Chiron return, even though they're not quite 250 years old, but coming up to that, which is, I believe, the fifth okay, 50, 100, 150, 25th Chiron return. Yep. So Chiron comes full circle in US chart, residing in the fourth house, unaspected, and the current Chiron is already darn close to the US Chiron, right? Comes only every 50 years. This Chiron is at 1947 Aries. The US Chiron is at where is it? Okay, so Uranus, the Chiron, 2008 Aries. So super close. And US has their first Chiron contact already in July as Chiron stations, and then goes retrograde at, let me just check it quickly to bring it out, at 2240, at between 22 and 23 Aries. Yeah, okay, so definitely already affecting the Chiron the Chiron return is in effect for the US pretty much all summer. And so here is also the wound of war. And there's even more, I would say, from the outside, even more battling, even more controversy and escalation and division and all this going on in the States than in Canada. And so what is the healing agent for this? And what is this wound all about? What does it go back to? What's the origin of it? When did it, how did it all start? What does it have to do actually Aries-wise in the fourth house, which has to do with the land itself as well, with the pioneer spirit, right? And what is going on now? What is the conflict? What's the competition here and the conflict that is being coming out on another level? Something to reflect upon. And yeah, so also it's not exact, but the US have a wide opposition between Chiron and Saturn. Saturn in Libra, Chiron in Aries. And Saturn is actually approaching that opposition. So it is, yeah, definitely relevant. And Saturn in the 10th house, where Saturn is strong, and also in Libra, where Saturn is super exalted. So what would be appropriate laws, legislation, and ways to find peace? Well, this is a huge issue in terms of the US involvement in the war in Ukraine, right? It's basically a war between US and Russia. So, and then Chiron, as it returns, I would say definitely has to do with war, right? So the US as a country always and so much at war abroad, a civil war, but abroad, so many battlegrounds. And so, what would bring peace? What would be the responsible thing to do? Is this a need for negotiation right now? Is it super timely? Can this go on like this? Saturn also calls for responsible leadership in that regard, right? So yeah, a lot is up, and I guess I leave it with this. Let me see where something I still want to address. No, I think that's good. And yeah, so some food for thought, and wish you a good week with a full moon right between the Canadian and US birthdays as we know them. Be well, and you could see me again on the next regular Astro weather for the coming week, starting with the full moon. And of course, there's some links and resources in the show notes. And of course, I'm available for sessions. This is what I've been doing for 22 and almost 23 years. So get in touch with me if you'd like to do a private session with me. Or have other ideas how to collaborate. I'm definitely open to that as well. Take care. Bye.